An amber haze pervaded the atmosphere, swirling particles of dust dancing their endless waltz through the twilight. The gas gauge plummeted towards E, and anxiety knotted my stomach. Stranded between the caress of dusk and the impending swallow of night, I limped the car toward a sight both welcomed and unnerving, a remote, seemingly desolate gas station. The structure was an antiquated relic, drenched in a melancholy that dripped from its rusted overhang and slumbering pumps. With no other option, I coasted in, the gravel crunching beneath tires, whispering tales of forgotten travels. The internal bell chimed as I entered, a metallic shiver cascading through the eerie stillness. An aged clerk emerged from the shadows, his eyes vacant yet inexplicably aware, studying me with a detached curiosity that prickled my skin. Without words, I handed over a crumpled bill, and with silent, deliberate movements, he activated the pump. As the fuel coursed into the tank, I surveyed the surroundings. Shadows clung to the barren shelves, and the scent of time, decayed and stale, permeated the air. The clerk, silent, observed from behind the grimy window, his gaze neither friendly nor hostile, merely expectant. Confidence, albeit shaky, gripped me as the pump clicked off, signaling a full tank. Yet scarcely had I driven 10 meters, the car stuttered, gasping like a dying creature, and with a final shudder, succumbed to silence. Disbelief anchored me to the spot. My gaze remained fixed on the fuel gauge, and a slow, sinking feeling began to churn in my stomach. The needle hadn't budged from E, blatantly dismissing the freshly purchased fuel. I blinked hard, half expecting the gauge to correct itself upon reopening my eyes, but it remained steadfast in its erroneous declaration. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening, as if applying pressure there could somehow influence the mocking needle before me. An unsettling stillness enveloped the car, broken only by the soft, intermittent clicks of the cooling engine. The door to the station groaned under my forceful push as I re-entered, yet the insides greeted me with an oppressive emptiness. The clerk was gone, the silence now an ominous specter, echoing the hollow thud of my racing heart. My phone, stubbornly, clung to its lack of signal, each attempted call a desperate plea into an electronic abyss. Hours blurred into an eternity, each tick of the clock a cruel reminder of my entrapment within this temporal prison. A distant rumble caressed my desperate ears, and, peering into the dark, I discerned headlights, a harbinger of salvation or doom. I could not tell. An aged sedan pulled in, and a man, cradled by years and weariness, stepped out, his eyes reflecting a tapestry of sorrows and unspoken fears. Through cracked, dry lips he spoke. "Son, what are you doing at this forsaken place?" I stammered, recounting my ordeal, my voice threading the fine line between sanity and despair. He listened, those ancient eyes absorbing my tale with a mournful understanding, before his words, barely a whisper, shattered my reality. "This station, it's been closed for decades," I protested, pointing to the fresh receipt clutched in my trembling hand. He glanced at it, a subtle, knowing sadness permeating his expression. "Many have been ensnared by this place," he continued, "lost souls seeking solace, finding only eternity. A figure, some say, resides here, feeding on the despair of those it traps, eternally hungry, perpetually unsatisfied." As he spoke, the shadows seemed to shift, a subtle, malevolent awareness flickering through the darkness. My mind raced, visions of the clerk, that hollow-eyed sentinel of this cursed station, skittering through my thoughts. The man, his eyes now echoing the countless others entrapped by this spectral snare, extended a hand, gnarled by time. "Come, before it senses you, before it claims you." Heart pounding, I took his hand, stepping into the relative safety of his vehicle. As we pulled away, I cast a final glance toward the station. Through the window, the faintest outline of a figure observed, its formless gaze an endless void, whispering of malevolence, of timeless hunger. In silent camaraderie, the old man and I traveled through the night, leaving behind a place unbound by time, where despair lingered as a perpetual feast for the figure in the shadows. And though we escaped its immediate clutches, the echoes of its silent malevolence lingered, an insidious reminder that some horrors, though unseen, are never truly left behind. I heard the bell above the door chime, and a woman stumbled in, her eyes wide with terror and a layer of sweat glistening on her forehead. I had been reading a magazine, feeling the slow drag of the night in the empty gas station. I jerked upright, immediately on edge at her appearance. "Please," she gasped, breathless. "You've got to help me. My daughter is in the car. She's not breathing." My heart raced, and without a second thought, I was on my feet, following her out into the chilling night. But as we neared her car, she vanished. In a blink, she was gone, leaving me bewildered in the dimly lit parking area. My eyes scanned the space, but neither the woman nor a car was in sight. My blood turned to ice in my veins as confusion swirled through my mind. I retreated to the inside of the gas station, my hands trembling and my mind tumbling through possibilities. Was she a figment of my imagination? My thoughts were shattered by the bell above the door. I jolted, turning to see the same woman, drenched in the same panic, bursting through the entrance. "You've got to help me!" she cried again, identical desperation lining her voice. "My daughter, she's in the car, she's not—" I cut her off, my voice a shaky whisper. "You've been here before, just a minute ago." She looked at me, her eyes flickering with confusion, and then solidifying back into horror. "What are you talking about? Please, there's no time." I followed her out again, my mind stuttering over the repetition. But this time, she and the car remained tangible as we approached. I peered inside, heart plummeting at the sight of a little girl, motionless in the back seat. I reached for the door handle, desperate to help, yet the moment my fingers brushed against it, the world blinked, and they were gone again, like a cruel mirage. I staggered back into the gas station, mind reeling, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. Was I losing my mind? I slumped against the counter, the cold seeping through my shirt, attempting to ground myself back into reality. The bell chimed again, and I barely lifted my head, already knowing the frantic plea that would pour from her lips. Her eyes, once bright with desperate hope, now seemed to carry a depth of perpetual despair that mirrored my own. "You've got to help me. My daughter. I can't." My voice was a broken whisper, the words barely making it out. She froze for a moment, the expected rush forward not coming. Confusion mingled with her panic as she stared at me. "What do you mean you can't? She's dying." Her voice cracked, shattering in the stifling air between us. I shook my head. "You'll disappear. It doesn't matter what I do. You'll just go." She didn't vanish this time, her eyes narrowing, fists clenching at her sides. A scream, raw and guttural, erupted from her, filling the silent void of the station. She lunged forward, seizing my shirt with trembling hands. "No! This is not a joke or a game. My baby is out there. You are going to help me." Her voice was ragged with desperation, her gaze piercing into mine, a maelstrom of pain and fear swirling within them. Silenced by her anguish, I found myself being dragged into the bitter night air, her grip unyielding. My feet stumbled to follow her, my mind numbly tumbling through the surreal nightmare this night had become. We reached the car, and the sight of the little girl, limp and unresponsive in the back seat, shattered whatever fragment of resolve remained within me. I felt the woman's grip on me slacken as she fell to her knees beside the vehicle, soft sobs racking through her. I performed CPR, my hands mechanically pumping against the tiny chest, breaths of life forced into dormant lungs, but her small form remained lifeless beneath my desperate attempts. Numbly, I reached for the phone in my pocket, no dial tone offering its steady hum to ground me. I ran back to the station, where an old landline hung on the wall. The dial tone was an eerie serenity amidst the chaos. I dialed 911, recounting the details with a mechanical detachment. We waited in silence. She crumpled on the floor, and I, hollowly gazing out into the abyss of the night. Emergency services arrived, performing their duties with a methodical precision that seemed so alien in the warped reality we were ensnared in. I watched them, the quiet murmur of their radios and the gentle reassurances offered to the mother barely registering. When they left, taking the woman and her daughter with them, I was left with the deafening silence of the gas station. My reflection in the window bore into me, an accusatory reminder of the what-ifs that now clawed at my conscience. Had I doomed the girl by hesitating? Could immediate action have snatched her from the jaws of death? The questions gnawed at me, a relentless tide eroding the edges of my sanity. I was left amidst the confectionery and fuel, a solitary figure haunted by the specter of relentless despair. My own reflection seemed to accuse me, whispering insidious doubts and condemnations that coiled within my mind. A chilling thought punctured through the fog of guilt and horror, its icy tendrils curling around my heart. Why had she returned over and over, stuck in a ghastly loop of desperation and sorrow, only to truly linger when it was too late? My grip on the steering wheel tightened as the illuminated E on my fuel gauge glared at me. I hadn't planned on stopping, but it was late, and the next service station was miles away. The solitary gas station, dimly lit and seemingly void of life, was the only option amidst the desolation of the midnight hour. My weary eyes scanned the small convenience store, taking in the rusting old pumps and the flickering fluorescent lights above. With a deep inhale, I reluctantly stepped out of my car, my shoes crunching on the gravel underneath, reverberating in the stark silence of the night. Inside the store, it was as expected. Old, slightly tattered magazines, snacks that seemed as if they had outlived their expiration dates, and a stillness that pervaded the air. I aimlessly wandered the aisles, grabbing a snack and a drink, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that began to coil in my stomach. Then it began. A subtle, yet unsettling noise. A soft clink, like a can being gently nudged from its place. My eyes darted towards the sound, but there was nothing. I squinted, trying to make out any anomalies in the poorly lit space, but saw only the neatly aligned items on the shelves. My heart drummed in my ears as I cautiously continued down the aisle, the ambient hum of the refrigerators becoming oddly menacing. I reassured myself, attributing my unease to fatigue and the natural creepiness of an old, isolated gas station. But then, it happened again. This time, a bag of chips slowly toppled off a shelf, hitting the ground with a soft rustle. I froze, my eyes locked onto the spot where it fell. There was no breeze, no logical reason for it to have fallen. My hands began to tremble as I cautiously approached the counter, every fiber of my being urging me to abandon my items and flee. Yet, an inexplicable need to maintain normalcy forced me to continue the transaction. The cashier, a middle-aged man with weary eyes, gave me a nod, seemingly oblivious to the peculiar occurrences surrounding us. The moment lingered too long, tension knotting the air as he slowly scanned my items, the beep of the barcode reader echoing eerily in the stillness. Another item fell in the aisle behind me, then another. My pulse raced, and yet the cashier remained unbothered, his movements deliberate and slow. I wanted to scream, to alert him to the oddities unfolding just a few feet away. But the words lodged in my throat, my voice a mere whisper as I handed over the money. His fingers brushed against mine, unexpectedly cold and unyielding. His gaze locked onto mine, a shadow of a smirk playing on his lips, as if he was privy to a sinister secret. As I hastily exited the store, the wind whistled eerily through the desolate landscape, the openness of the outside providing no comfort. The gas pump clicked and groaned as I refueled, the sound unnervingly reminiscent of muffled screams. Another thud emanated from within the store, louder, more insistent, yet when I turned, the cashier was simply staring, unmoving, his eyes void of emotion. My skin crawled, a silent scream lodged in my chest as I wrestled the pump back into place and bolted to my car. The engine roared to life, and as I sped away, the rearview mirror revealed the cashier still standing there, the items inside the store now hurtling off shelves with violent fervor, his eyes locked onto mine, and that faint, unsettling smirk still present. The distant lights of the gas station eventually dimmed in the rearview mirror, the darkness enveloping it once more. Questions raced through my mind, the events replaying like a horrifying loop, each iteration more perplexing and chilling than the last. I knew there would be no answers, no resolution to the chilling experience. Only the haunting memories, lingering like an unshakable shadow, imprinted permanently in the recesses of my mind. My hands quivered on the wheel, the unnerving feeling of being watched lingering as the dark highway stretched endlessly before me.